Today I'm going to be talking about Rabbit Proof Fence by Doris Pilkington Gamera and the historical and cultural context that shaped the book. This text tells the true story of three Aboriginal girls, Molly, Daisy, and Gracie, who were taken from their families by the Australian government in 1931 to a settlement far from home. What makes this story so powerful is that it's not just one moment or one family. It represents a much larger system of policies that aimed to control the Aboriginal people and erase their culture. By understanding the history behind the book, we can better understand why these events happened and why Rabbit Proof Fence is still important today. Rabbit Proof Fence is based on real events and Indigenous oral history. Doris Pilkington wrote the book using the memories and experiences of her mother, Molly, who was one of the girls taken. The story begins in Jigalong, where the girls live with their family and community. This life is suddenly disrupted when officials arrive and remove them without warning. The girls are sent to Moore River Native Settlement, where they are expected to forget their language and culture. Not long after arriving, Molly decides that they are going home, and she leads the girls on a long and dangerous journey by following the rabbit-proof fence, which becomes a symbol of survival and resistance. In the early 1990s or 1900s, the Australian government believed that Aboriginal people needed to be supervised and controlled. Officials viewed the Aboriginal culture as backward and believed that the Indigenous people should eventually be absorbed into white society. These beliefs were influenced by racial theories and eugenics, which ranked the races and claimed that white culture was superior. Government officials believed that removing the Aboriginal children from their families would solve what they would call the Aboriginal problem. This historical context explains how the events in the Rabbit Proof Fence were not random acts, but the results of structured government policies. A significant quote that was that I looked at via my research in The Empire of Illusions is eugenic thinking shaped how Aboriginal people were supervised and controlled. This quote means that the eugenic beliefs influenced how the government controlled Aboriginal people in everyday life. Officials believed that the Aboriginal people needed supervision, which justified strict rules about where they lived, how children were raised, and how they were allowed to see or learn. This idea is explained in the Empire Illusions text, which showed how eugenic thinking shaped policies of surveillance and control. The forced removal of Aboriginal children is known as the Stolen Generations. From the late 1800s until the 1970s, thousands of Aboriginal children were taken from their families across Australia. Authorities often claim that those removals were the children's own good, but in reality, they caused deep trauma. Children were often placed in institutions where they were punished, underfed, and isolated from their families. Many lost their language and cultural identity. In Rabbit Proof Fence, Molly, Daisy, and Gracie are simply taken because they are Aboriginal. Their experiences reflect that many families endured during this period. One of the significant quotes from research is the removal of children caused profound grief and suffering and loss. This really demonstrated how the Aboriginal people were removed from their families and forced into confinement areas where they were punished just for simply being Aboriginal. A.O. Neville was the chief protector of the Aboriginals in Western Australia and played a major role in enforcing assimilation policies. Neville believed that the Aboriginal people needed strict control and believed that mixed-race children could be absorbed into white society over time. He viewed child removal as necessary and justified, even though it caused immense suffering. In rabbit-proof fence, Naville represents the mindset of the government, one that believed it had the authority to decide the future of Aboriginal children without consent. Another significant quote from readings is country is a fundamental component of Aboriginal people's well-being. This quote means that land or country is not just a place for Aboriginal people, but a core part of who they are and how they stay healthy. Their well-being depends on maintaining a connection to their land via their culture, family, and spirituality, and responsibility to care for it. When people are separated from their country, their sense of identity and balance is harmed, which helps explain the trauma shown in rabbit-proof fence. Life at Moore River Native Settlement was presented as a place of care, but was harsh and restrictive. Children were not allowed to speak their language or practice their culture. Food was limited, and punishment was very common. Families were separated, and the settlement focused on discipline and labor rather than education or well-being. Pilkington contrasts the Moore River with a life at Geelong to highlight the damage caused by the removal. This contrast helps why Molly believes that escaping is the only way to reclaim freedom and dignity. The image depicted here is a group of assimilated individuals at Moore River Settlement. They're forced to wear clothing of their captors and they're stripped of their original garments. The rabbit-proof fence was originally built by the Australian government as a way to control the land. It was designed to stop rabbits from spreading into farm areas, and in that sense, it represented colonial efforts to control nature and impose order on the land. The fence was part of a much larger system where government believed it had the right to manage land, animals, and people. In rabbit-proof fence, the same structure takes on a completely different meaning. Instead of being a symbol of control, it becomes a tool for survival and freedom. Molly realizes that if they follow the fence, it will lead them all the way back home to Geelong. She famously believes that the fence will take us home. From that moment on, the fence becomes a guide rather than a barrier. This reversal is important because it shows the Aboriginal resistance in a very quiet, however powerful way. The girls don't destroy the fence or fight it directly. Instead, they reclaim it and use it for their own purpose. A structure created by the colonial system to control land ends up helping the girls escape their captors. The fence also highlights the girls' knowledge and intelligence, while the government underestimated the Aboriginal people. Molly understands how to use the landscape to survive. This shows that even within a system of controls, Aboriginal people found a way to resist, adapt, and reclaim their own identity. The image is This image is of the rabbit-proof fence that the girls would have had to walk along during their arduous journey back home. As depicted in the picture, it is a very vast, barren area of the land that they would have to walk through in order to see their parents again. When we talk about the government control over the average people, it's important to understand that it went beyond child removal and institutions like Moore River. The article Empire of Illusions shows how the Aboriginal people were also controlled in cultural spaces, including movie theaters. During the early 20th century, officials believed that the Aboriginal audiences needed supervision, even though when watching films, movies were censored or restricted because authorities feared that the Aboriginal viewers might question colonial authority or be influenced in ways they couldn't control. This shows that the government regulation reached into everyday life, not just education or housing. What's important is that this censorship was based on the same racist and eugenic ideas that justified child removal. Aboriginal people were viewed as needing constant guidance and oversight. This helps explain how taking children from their families was seen as acceptable by the government. Looking at cultural control alongside the rabbit-proof fence, helps us see how widespread the system was. Control wasn't limited to one policy, it shaped nearly every part of the Aboriginal life. The quote, McGregor distinguishes Cook's brand of eugenics by the term absorptionism, crudely known in the North as the fuck 'em white policy. This quote explains a type of eugenics called absorptionism, which was the belief that Aboriginal people could be gradually absorbed into white society through assimilation and reproduction. The goal was not to support the Aboriginal culture, but to eliminate over time by breaking family and community connections. The crude language shows how dehumanizing these policies were, and helps explain why the Aboriginal children were targeted for removal, as seen in the rabbit-proof fence. By research, it helps us confirm that the events of the rabbit-proof fence was not an isolated incident. Anne-Marie Payne's article explains that the Aboriginal child removal was part of a larger, organized system of colonial control. Payne shows these policies were designated to assimilate Aboriginal children into white society and were based on the belief that the Aboriginal culture needed to be eliminated. This helps explain why children were moved so constantly across Australia and for such a long period of time. The article uh, via this research explains that the effects of removal did not end when the children grew up. Instead, the trauma continued across generations, affecting families and communities long after the policies officially ended. Uh, this source supports rabbit defense by showing that Molly's experience is not unusual. Her story represents a widespread policy that shaped Aboriginal lives for decades, making both her book and historically accurate, deeply representative. Why does it still matter? Even though rabbit defense takes place in the 1930s, the issues it still raises are still very relevant today. The effects of child removal, assimilation, and cultural loss did not end when these policies stopped. Many Aboriginal families continue to feel the emotional and social impacts across generations. In 2008, the Australian government formally apologized to the stolen generations. While this apology was an important step, it did not erase the harm that had already been done. Healing takes time, and understanding these histories is part of that process. Proof Defense matters because it gives a voice to people who were ignored or silenced for a long period of time. By telling the story from the Aboriginal perspective, the book challenges the official government narratives and encourages readers to confront the uncomfortable truths and reminds us why listening to Indigenous voices and learning from the past is necessary if real change is going to happen. In conclusion, Proof Fence is more than just like a survival story. It exposes how government policies, racism, and cultural control shaped Aboriginal lives. By understanding the historical context behind the book, we can see that the girl's journey home represents resistance, strength, and healing. Her work ensures that these stories are not forgotten and challenges the readers to rethink how history is told. Thank you. There's, hmm, wait, there's no.